They say some truths are too heavy to carry alone. And for 16 years, I carried mine in silence. Tucked behind smiles, folded into bedtime stories, stitched into every packed lunch, every "I love you." I told myself I was protecting him. But really, I think I was protecting me. The day I told my son he was adopted wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the beginning of a storm I didn't see coming. Because what he did next didn't just surprise me. It broke something in me I didn't even know could break. I remember the moment so clearly. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that hums in your ears when you're afraid to say the next word. Sunlight was pouring through the curtains like it didn't know it was about to witness a betrayal. He sat across from me, slouched in that chair he always curled up in to play video games or scroll through memes. But that day, he looked older, sharper, like he already knew. And maybe he did. My throat was dry. My hands were shaking. I kept thinking, how do you tell someone the story of their life was a lie you wrapped in love? How do you admit that the thing you feared the most was them walking away from you once they knew the truth? I had rehearsed the words 100 times in my head, but when it was time to say them out loud, they didn't sound like protection. They sounded like confession. They sounded like failure. I told him, and I watched his eyes go quiet. Not angry, not even shocked, just distant, like he was reaching back through every memory we'd ever shared, every scraped knee I kissed, every late-night talk, every birthday candle blown out with me by his side, trying to figure out if it was still real, if I was still real. And then, he did something I didn't expect, something that still keeps me up at night. He stood up. He looked me straight in the eye, and with a voice that didn't sound like my little boy anymore, he said, "I already know. This isn't a story about right or wrong. It's not about perfect mothers or tidy endings. It's about love that gets messy, about truths that wait too long, and about a boy who had to become a man the moment he found out he'd been living someone else's story. So before we begin, I need you to know this. This isn't easy to tell, but it's real. And if you've ever loved someone so fiercely it scared you, if you've ever kept a secret because you thought it was kinder that way, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand me. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where we tell the stories that live in the quiet spaces between guilt and grace. Because sometimes, the most powerful truths are the ones we whisper, even when they deserve to be screamed. I'm a woman in my 40s. I live in a house with beige walls, polished floors, and picture frames that hold smiles from better years. From the outside, you'd say we look like any other family. Stable, comfortable, normal. But inside, everything feels like it's just holding itself together. I've been tired for a long time. Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix. The kind that lives in your bones. The kind that comes from pretending everything is fine when it isn't. From waking up every day with a secret pressing against your chest and going to bed with it curled up beside you like a second heartbeat. I carried that secret for 16 years. I buried it so deep that sometimes I forgot it was even there. Sometimes I actually believed he was mine by blood. But love doesn't need biology. Or at least, that's what I told myself. David. He's 16 now. My son. My boy. Kind-hearted. Too kind, sometimes. He always noticed when I was having a hard day. He'd bring me tea, sit with me in the kitchen, even when his friends were calling. He never asked for much. Never pushed too hard. Just loved me in that quiet way boys do when they're not sure if it's okay to show how much they care. He's smart. Top of his class. Loves music more than sports. Always had more questions about the world than I could answer. He was my shadow when he was little. And even now, even in all his teenage distance, he still looked at me like I was his home. But something changed. Or maybe it had always been there, and I just refused to see it. He's always been distant from his father. My husband, Mark. Their relationship was complicated. They never fought, but they never really connected either. Mark was the kind of man who believed providing was enough. Long hours at the office. Long silences at the dinner table. His love came in the form of bills paid and doors locked at night. After we couldn't have children together, something broke in him. He never said it out loud, but I think a part of him blamed me. And another part blamed himself. We stopped talking about it. We stopped talking about most things. Eventually, we adopted David. He was just 3 weeks old. Tiny. Soft. Eyes too big for his face. I held him, and something inside me whispered, "This is yours now." But even then, even in that joy, there was a sadness in Mark's eyes that never left. He did what needed to be done. But he never looked at David like he was his. Not the way I did. Over the years, our marriage became a routine. Two people orbiting the same house, speaking only when necessary. No warmth. No spark. Just the dull hum of responsibility. The house was clean. The bills were paid. Dinner was made, the lawn trimmed, the calendar full of things we never looked forward to. It was the kind of life that looks good in pictures. But it always felt hollow. A cozy home, yes. Cushions arranged just right. Candles lit. But the warmth wasn't real. It was the kind of home that knew how to pretend. And I became good at pretending too. At smiling through the ache. At carrying that secret in my chest like it was just another part of me. David grew up inside that house. And for a long time, I thought I was enough. Enough mother to make up for the father who never really saw him. Enough love to cover the truth I'd hidden. But love built on silence. It only holds for so long. And the day he said, "I already know," I felt the weight of every year I'd spent trying to outrun the truth. It had caught up. And it wasn't finished with me yet. It started with something so ordinary. A school form. That's all it was. He needed his birth certificate. Said they asked for it at school. Something about exam registration. Matching documents. I don't remember now. I just remember the way his voice came from the hallway. Casual, like any other afternoon. "Mom, where do we keep the documents?" I told him. "Top drawer in the study. Blue folder marked important." I didn't think twice. I should have. He was in there longer than usual. And when he came back out, he wasn't holding the form. He was holding a white envelope. Old. Bent at the corners. His hands were shaking, but his face was still. He sat across from me. Like he always did. Same chair. Same tilt of the head. But something in him had shifted. And then he said, soft, barely above a whisper, "Why does this say David Allen Moore?" My breath caught. Everything in me froze. He wasn't angry. That's what gutted me. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't accusing. He just looked lost. Like he'd opened a door and the entire house behind it had disappeared. I laughed. I don't even know why. One of those nervous, fragile laughs that cracks before it forms. That's nothing, I said. Just a mix-up, a paper from the agency, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they sounded wrong. Weak. Hollow. He didn't push. He just nodded. Folded the paper back into the envelope like it had never been touched. "Okay," he said. But his eyes, they said everything he didn't. They said, "You just lied to me." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake with the sound of that envelope crinkling in my ears. I kept picturing him sitting there, trying to make sense of something he wasn't ready to face. Something I should have told him years ago. My chest felt tight. Like my own secret was turning into a fist, pressing down hard. I stared at the ceiling, at the shadows dancing across it, and all I could see was his face. Not angry. Not scared. Just different. Like I wasn't who he thought I was anymore. And I knew. I couldn't lie to him again. I had to tell him. Everything. I stared at the ceiling until the sky outside turned from black to gray. And in those quiet hours, I kept thinking, when did I start believing silence was love? When did I decide that not telling him was safer than watching his love for me shift? It wasn't always like this. There was a time I believed in forever. Believed that marriage was made of truth and tenderness, that pain could be talked through and healed. But that belief died the day I found the text messages. Late at night, Mark's phone left face up, her name flashing like a curse I didn't recognize. It wasn't just one message, it was months. Conversations dripping with things I hadn't heard from him in years. And worse than the affair itself was what came after. Silence. Not guilt. Not an apology. Just distance. He didn't fight to keep me. He didn't beg. He just stood there, like someone watching a house burn from the sidewalk. We stopped trying for a baby not long after. Doctors said there was damage. Scarring. They didn't say whether it was physical or emotional, but both felt permanent. I'd always wanted to be a mother. Even as a little girl, I imagined bedtime songs and scraped knees and tiny arms wrapped around my neck. That dream had been the one thing I held onto. So when they handed me David, 3 weeks old, swaddled tight, blinking up at the world like it was too loud, I fell in love instantly. No hesitation. No second thoughts. He didn't come from me, but he became mine in that moment. My son, my second chance, my reason to wake up. And Mark. He signed the papers, yes. Took the photos at the courthouse. Held David on the drive home. But he never felt like a father. Not in the way I hoped he would. He provided. He existed. But he never connected. So I raised David alone, inside a marriage. Every school drop-off. Every bedtime story. Every heartbreak. It was me. And I never complained. Because he gave me more love than I thought I deserved. But still, that secret followed me everywhere. Every birthday candle he blew out. Every question about baby pictures. Every time he looked at me and said, "I love you, Mom," I'd feel it. That ache. That fear. What if he knew? What if, knowing, he looked at me differently? What if that love shifted? I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of losing the illusion that he had always been mine. The illusion that blood didn't matter. That love was enough. I told myself I was protecting him. That the truth would only confuse him. That there was no need to stir something that didn't need stirring. But the truth? It wasn't about protecting him. It was about protecting me. Because deep down I knew. If he ever found out, if he ever felt the space between us, it wouldn't be me he came to for comfort anymore. And I wasn't ready to lose that. Not even to the truth. But guilt. It's a slow poison. It doesn't scream. It whispers. At the dinner table. In the laundry room. In the silence between two people who used to speak in laughter. And after 16 years, it had begun to rot everything I touched. Even the way I looked at him. Every hug felt heavier. Every mom felt fragile. Like I didn't fully deserve it. And now that the truth was out, or at least sensed, I couldn't go back. The silence that once protected me was now turning into the very thing that might take him from me. I waited until Sunday. I don't know why. Maybe because Sunday felt softer, quieter. Like the world would slow down enough to catch us if we fell. I made tea, set the mugs on the table, sat across from him like it was just another conversation. But it wasn't. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My voice caught before it even left my throat. I looked at him, really looked at him. 16 years old, taller than me now, but still holding that same tilt to his head he had as a toddler when he was trying to understand something too big for his world. And I told him. All of it. I told him he was adopted. That I couldn't carry children. That it wasn't just biology, it was betrayal. That his father had had an affair. That by the time we found out the damage was done, the marriage had already started unraveling, thread by thread. I told him about the paperwork. The night I stayed up, signing my name on lines that would make him mine forever. I told him I chose him. Not out of desperation. But because the moment I saw him, I knew. I knew he was the child I was meant to raise. And, through it all, he didn't say a word. He didn't cry. Didn't ask questions. Didn't scream or storm out. He just stared. Like I was a stranger. Like every word was a crack in the floor beneath him, and he was just trying not to fall through. Then he stood up, turned, and walked out the front door without looking back. I didn't follow. I sat at that table until the tea went cold, until the sun dropped behind the window and the house fell back into silence. He didn't come home until after midnight. Didn't say where he'd been. Didn't say anything at all. And the days that followed were worse than I imagined. He started skipping school, coming home late. Sometimes he wouldn't eat. Sometimes he'd eat like he hadn't in days. He wouldn't talk to me. Wouldn't look me in the eye. He moved through the house like a guest. Not angry. Not loud. Just gone. I tried to reach him. I knocked on his door. Asked if he wanted dinner. Told him I loved him. He'd nod, say okay, and go right back to staring at the ceiling. Mark noticed, of course. But all he said was, "You should have told him sooner." No comfort. No softness. He didn't even ask if I was okay. It was like I had done something wrong. Like telling the truth made me the villain. But I didn't do it for Mark. I did it for David. Because secrets rot from the inside. And I couldn't carry this one any longer, not if it meant losing what little of myself I still recognized. It wasn't until the end of that week that David finally let it out. He came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes. Leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "You should have told me," he said. His voice was calm, measured, but his eyes were red. "You let me believe a story that wasn't even real." I tried to speak, but he cut me off. "All those years. I asked about the baby pictures, and you'd change the subject. I asked why Dad was so cold, and you'd just say he's tired. I thought we were close." "We were close," I whispered. He shook his head. "No. You were close to the version of me that didn't know the truth. But now I wonder if I ever really knew you." And that broke me more than anything else ever had. Not the adoption. Not Mark's affair. Not the infertility. But this, my son questioning if I was real. I saw the phone in his hand then. Lit up with a message. He glanced at it quickly. Pressed the screen. Tucked it away. Something about the way he did it. Quiet. Secretive. He was texting someone. Often. Late into the night. I didn't recognize the name when it flashed one evening, just for a second. But it wasn't someone I knew. A girl, maybe? Or maybe not. And that was the part that began to scare me. Because secrets don't stop with one confession. They spread. And now, he had one of his own. It was a Thursday. Clouds were hanging low like the sky had something to confess to. David hadn't come home from school. Again. I waited. Tried calling twice. No answer. I stood by the window for what felt like hours, watching the streetlight flicker at the corner, listening for the sound of his footsteps on the porch. But when the silence got too loud, I grabbed my keys. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't have a plan. Just followed a feeling. Something had been gnawing at me for days. The way he clutched that phone. The way he started dressing different, walking different, like someone trying to step into a new skin. I knew he was hiding something. But I didn't expect her. I parked across from the cafe downtown. Saw him through the glass, sitting in the corner booth. His back was to me. But I'd know that posture anywhere. Hunched just slightly, head tilted, one leg bouncing beneath the table, nervous, but trying not to show it. And across from him, a woman. Mid-30s. Dark curls pulled back. A soft face. Familiar eyes. Eyes I'd seen staring back at me in his. My stomach dropped. I stayed in the car, frozen. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't blink. She was smiling. He was laughing in a way I hadn't heard in weeks. Free. Open. She reached out and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. And then he stood. Came around the table. And hugged her. Not a polite hug. Not an awkward, thanks for the coffee hug. But something deeper. Longer. like his body remembered her, like he'd always known her scent. And in that moment, I was no longer the only mother he loved. I don't know how long I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding in my throat. Tears welled up, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. She looked at him the way I used to. Before the weight of secrets, before the silence. Like he was whole. Like he belonged. He had found her. Through the documents, probably. Maybe he'd been searching longer than I realized. And she hadn't known he was looking. I could tell by the way she kept stealing glances at him, like he was a miracle she never thought she'd see again. When they stood to leave, I ducked lower in the seat. Watched them walk together down the street. Not mother and son. Not yet. But something was forming. I didn't follow. I drove home. Parked in the garage. Sat in the dark. And I cried, not because he met her. Not because he smiled at her the way he used to smile at me. But because I had waited too long. Waited until his love had questions I couldn't answer. Waited until someone else held the space I once filled. I wasn't angry with him. How could I be? He was looking for something I took away. Something I buried beneath good intentions and quiet guilt. And now, watching him with her, I knew. He wasn't running from me. He was running to the part of himself I never let him see. And that was my fault. After that night, something shifted. Not with thunder. Not with shouting or slammed doors. It was quieter than that. More dangerous. David came home late the next evening. Said he was at the library. Didn't mention her. Didn't lie, but didn't tell the truth either. I didn't ask. I couldn't. Because I already knew. By the end of that week, he started packing a bag on Fridays. Small things at first: headphones, a book, a spare hoodie. Then came the overnight stays. By the second weekend, he didn't even look uncertain when he said, "I'll be with her till Sunday." He didn't call her mom, not in front of me. But the way he said her, it carried weight. At home, he was polite. Distant, but not cruel. He did the dishes when asked. Said good night with a nod. His room stayed clean. But the warmth, the little jokes, the lingering hugs, the spontaneous laughter, it all disappeared. I'd walk past his room and see him sitting by the window, phone in hand, headphones in, eyes lost in a world I no longer belonged to. He didn't hate me, but he didn't need me anymore. And that was worse. I tried. God, I tried. Made his favorite dinner, chicken stir-fry with too much garlic, just how he liked it. He ate quietly. Said it was good. Went upstairs before I could ask how school was going. I knocked on his door one evening. Stood there with my hand hovering for a minute too long. He opened it halfway. "Can we talk?" I asked. He looked tired. Not angry. Just done. About what? I didn't have an answer. Because how do you ask someone to love you the way they used to? I miss you, I said. He nodded. I'm still here. But he wasn't. Not really. And Mark? He noticed none of it. Or pretended not to. He still left early, came home late. Dinner was silent. TV filled the spaces where conversations should have lived. I cried once, quietly in bed. Not loud enough for anyone to hear. The next morning, I made coffee, folded laundry, watered the plants. Just like always. Mark didn't ask what was wrong. He never did. We lived like roommates now. Sharing a roof, sharing bills. Nothing more. The house felt colder, even when the sun was out. Like joy had left the building and taken all the warmth with it. And me? I was somewhere in between, no longer the mother he clung to. Not yet the woman he forgave. Have you ever hidden a truth? Not because you meant to deceive, but because you were afraid of what the truth might undo. Have you ever kept something buried? Convinced that silence was safer than pain? I did. For 16 years. And when I finally let it rise to the surface, I watched everything change. Was I wrong to wait this long? Or was I just a mother? Trying to hold on to something I never truly had? trying to preserve a bond that was real in every moment, even if it wasn't born from blood. If you've ever held a truth too tightly, if you've ever chosen love over honesty, or maybe tried to make them mean the same thing, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments. Tell me your turning point, your heartbreak, your hardest choice. I read every word, because somewhere between our stories, there's healing. And if this one touched something in you, if it reminded you of a silence you once held, or a love you were afraid to lose, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. This is where we speak the quiet truths, where we remember that behind every decision, there's a person just trying to make sense of it all. Tap the bell, because the next story might echo your own. Truth is a strange thing. It can set you free, or leave you standing in a room you no longer recognize. He still calls me Mom, but there's hesitation in the way it lands. There's a pause in his hugs, a soft space where certainty used to live. Some cracks don't heal. They don't close. They just hold. I told my son the truth, and in doing so, I lost a piece of him. A piece I may never get back. But maybe, just maybe, that truth gave him back a piece of himself. Maybe the part of him that wondered, that felt something missing, finally has a name for the space inside. And maybe that's worth something. If you ever find yourself standing at the edge, holding truth in one hand and love in the other, know this: both will leave scars. But only one will let the light in.